Long time no see. And you know what happens when there's no C? Only 25 letters in the alphabet. Assalamu alaikum. So today, we will talk about interest, and interest by its very literal meaning should be interesting to talk about. There's an argument which says interest fights inflation, and then there's a view which says that interest causes inflation. So what are the points backing these claims? So I'm going to discuss both of these points, and then I'm going to leave it up to you to decide and to think about as to which points are more realistic, because no one really officially or theoretically has settled upon this in a very conclusive manner. So people who say that interest actually fights inflation, this is how they tell their story. They say that interest is caused, and it's true, inflation is caused. Inflation is caused when there is more demand than supply. When there's more demand than supply, then you can charge more for your products and your services. Or in other words, the amount or the quantity of products and services does not increase, but the amount of currency in circulation increases comparatively. Like, the products are not increasing, but the amount of money is increasing. So now there's more money per product in a society. So that, of course, causes the prices of the products and services to rise, because now there is enough currency in the society for the producers of products and services to charge more. It is possible for them to charge more. And theoretically, people have the capacity to pay more, although it eventually leads to frustration in public and psychologically depressing that their money is losing value. So these people who say that interest actually fights inflation, what they say is that people borrow money from banks. Banks in turn have borrowed money partially from central banks. So, of course, there's borrowing on interest in conventional norms. So when the interest is high, the borrowing would be lower, because the cost of credit, the cost of borrowing, the cost of having money earlier is higher. And when something is costly, you have less of it, right? So when there will be higher interest, and the cost of credit, which is interest, will go up, people will borrow less. When people will borrow less, they will eventually have less money to spend. And when they have less money to spend, the demand for products and services will eventually have to go down, because now people don't have as much money because they borrowed less because it was expensive. That's the claim. That's really that simple, because when you increase the price of credit, when you increase interest, the mechanism of the economic system, money changing hands and more money coming into existence by either credit creation or fractional reserve system, slows down because it's more expensive. So there'll be less borrowing, and because there'll be less borrowing, people will have less money, and when people will have less money, they'll spend less, and when they'll spend less, there'll be less demand, and when there will be less demand, the producers of products and services will have to lower their prices, and when they lower their prices, inflation will come down. That is the story central banks tell all the time. But on the other hand, there's claim that interest actually causes inflation. So how does interest cause inflation? What is the argument over there? Well, the argument is the argument is that when you increase the cost of borrowing, when you increase interest, well, it's not just the common public who borrows money from banks. In fact, I would argue that most of the time the actual borrowing is done not by the common public, but by the corporations and companies and manufacturers and industries which produce those products and services. And when they borrow money, which they have to pay back with interest to produce products and services, they have to add that price of credit, they have to add that interest rate which they have to pay back in the price of their products and services. So if they're getting money at a cheaper rate, they can sell their products at a cheaper rate. But if they're getting money, if the lending is happening at a higher rate of interest, they have to pay back more. So that higher rate of interest is then included in the price of the products and services. So because they still have to make that much profit, but the credit price is high, they have to pay higher interest. So that higher interest is also included in the products, thus raising the price of the products and services. So if there was a shoe selling at $50 or say 5,000 rupees, for example, and the companies which made those shoes borrowed money at a rate of, for example, 5% per month, but now they have to pay, say, 15% interest. So now they still want to make the same amount of profit, but they have to pay back more interest. So where will they get that extra money to pay that extra 10%? Instead of 5%, they have to pay back 15% interest. So where will that extra 10% come from? Well, of course, from the consumers. So they add that extra price, that extra interest rate into the price of their products and services, thus raising their price, thus causing inflation. So this is the basic argument which says that which supports the view that interest actually causes inflation. Now, these are two, in a way, contradictory truths at the same time, and I personally think that both of these mechanisms take place in a society at the same time. And whether interest will cause inflation or whether it will fight inflation depends on which one of these two forces are of a greater magnitude. Is the first argument, which says increasing credit price decreases currency creation in society, hence decreasing demand, is the impact of that mechanism higher, or is the impact of the other mechanism higher, which leads the manufacturers to increase the price of their products and services? Which one of these two mechanisms have a higher magnitude of impact? Whichever one it is, that is what ends up happening. That's my analysis. And I want you guys to think about it and let me know what you think about the situation. And I will see you in the next video. Assalamu alaikum.